The sun cast a golden sheen over Beverly Hills, painting the sidewalks in shimmering tones as luxury cars purred down the boulevard. At the heart of the upscale district stood Verité, a boutique whispered about in fashion circles and frequented by celebrities who knew the difference between couture and costume. Inside, polished marble floors reflected the soft glow of gold-framed chandeliers. Rows of exclusive designer wear stood elegantly spaced, each piece more expensive than most people's monthly salary. Ria stood near the entrance, a tablet in hand, her stilettos clicking softly against the floor as she paced with poise. 38, she was as much a part of Verité's image as the mannequins in the window, sharp, styled, and unapologetically selective. Ria believed in judging character at a glance. 2 decades in luxury retail had taught her that appearances meant everything. She could tell a buyer from a browser before they said a word. So, when the boutique's glass doors opened with a soft chime and a man walked in wearing a gray hoodie, scuffed sneakers, and relaxed jeans, she didn't need a second look. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a quiet presence that drew no attention. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his eyes moved calmly across the boutique, taking in each corner. But his clothes, plain, unbranded, gave Ria all the information she thought she needed. She leaned slightly toward Milo, the youngest sales associate, who stood by the display of silk dresses. "Don't waste time," she whispered, adjusting the diamond pin on her collar. "He's not buying anything." Milo hesitated. Something about the man didn't quite fit the usual window shopper profile. But Ria's instincts ruled the boutique, and he had learned not to question her. The man, unfazed by their glances, walked slowly toward a corner where a deep plum coat hung on a brass rack. The fabric was cashmere wool blend, stitched by a Parisian designer and priced at just under $15,000. He brushed his fingers over the material, examining the texture, then turned to look around. His eyes met Ria's, and he approached her with quiet confidence. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm, warm. "Can you tell me more about this coat? I haven't seen this piece before." Ria didn't bother masking the flat smile that spread across her face. "That's the Rossetti Limited series," she replied crisply. "Only 5 in the country, handmade. It's not for casual browsing." The man nodded slowly, unfazed. "It's beautiful. Do you allow fittings?" She gave a soft laugh that barely masked her condescension. "Normally, yes. But for high-value items, we require a pre-authorization. Store policy." "That's so?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. "It's standard procedure," she added, her tone sweet but firm. "We just like to ensure serious intent before taking garments off." Display. Milo pretended to organize scarves nearby, trying to avoid the tension in the air. He had never heard of that policy before, but again, he had seen Ria invent rules when she didn't want someone in the store. The man looked back at the coat, then returned his gaze to Ria. "I'd like to buy something today. Could I speak to someone about the available colors, or maybe see if there are other sizes?" "We typically work by appointment," Ria replied, her smile tight. "Especially for this level of product. Most of our clientele pre-select before visiting." He raised an eyebrow, more amused than annoyed. "Even if I'm paying in cash?" She blinked once, then regained her composure. "Well, large cash purchases still require documentation. IRS standards, of course." His eyes scanned the boutique, once more, landing briefly on Milo, who gave a faint, sympathetic smile. "You seem to have a lot of policies." Ria didn't flinch. "Exclusivity isn't for everyone." He let out a soft breath, neither angry nor offended. "Interesting. Just out of curiosity," he asked, voice steady. "What would it take for someone like me to be taken seriously in here?" Her expression didn't change. "We value our guests' time and our brand's image. Our clients usually don't come in wearing casual gear." He chuckled under his breath. "So, not the hoodie, huh?" Rhea gave a light shrug, pleased with her control of the situation. First impressions matter. The man nodded slowly, lips curling into something that almost resembled a smile. "Noted," he said simply. He turned and walked toward the door, pausing briefly as if committing the layout of the store to memory. Just before exiting, he looked over his shoulder. And what if someone wanted to buy that entire coat rack? No fitting, no questions asked. What would that require? Rhea let out a delicate laugh. Honestly, a miracle. He gave her a final glance, polite yet unreadable, then pushed open the door and stepped out into the California sun. Milo stared. After him, a strange feeling growing in his gut. He didn't know who the man was, but something told him this wasn't the last they'd see of him. And Rhea, satisfied with another problem escorted out, turned her focus back to her tablet, unaware that her most expensive mistake had just walked out the door. The boutique quieted after the man's departure, but Milo couldn't shake the odd feeling lingering in his chest. The man's voice, calm and composed, had carried weight beyond what his clothing suggested. There had been something deliberate in his walk, something measured in his tone. Milo had seen difficult customers, eccentric fashionistas, even Hollywood, celebrities. But this felt different. Rhea didn't seem fazed. She returned to organizing the glass jewelry display, her heels clicking like punctuation marks across the floor. "That's what happens when you let anyone wander in," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for Milo to hear but not comment. He wanted to ask whether the policy about fittings and cash purchases actually existed, but he knew better. Challenging Rhea, even indirectly, was career suicide. So he bit his tongue and nodded, even as the unease settled deeper. 15 minutes later, another customer entered. A young woman in a flowing cream dress with oversized sunglasses and a tiny dog in tow. Rhea's entire posture shifted. Her voice lifted, her shoulders straightened, and the disinterest that clouded her face earlier vanished in an instant. "Welcome to Verité," she chimed, sweeping toward the woman. "You look radiant today. May I show you our newest arrivals?" Milo stepped back and resumed folding scarves, pretending not to hear Rhea gushing over silk linings and limited editions. He had always admired her professionalism, but lately her customer treatment seemed more like performance than service. People in expensive clothes received smiles. Others got filters and suspicion. He glanced at the empty coat rack where the man had stood moments earlier. The plum-colored coat still hung there like an unopened secret. Milo shook his head and returned to work. Just then, the front door opened again. This time, the man from earlier did not return, but someone else walked in, someone who immediately turned heads. A sleek black SUV had pulled up to the curb moments before. From it emerged a tall man in a navy blue suit, tailored to perfection, his silver hair catching the light. The moment he entered, the atmosphere inside shifted like a sudden drop in temperature. Rhea spotted him instantly. Her eyes widened, recognition dawning before the man even spoke. "Mr. Grant?" she exclaimed, abandoning the young woman mid-sentence. "What a pleasant surprise! We weren't expecting a visit today." He gave a nod but didn't slow down. His eyes swept the boutique like someone looking for something specific. Or someone. "Is he here?" he asked, pausing near the front display. Rhea blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Nico," he clarified, scanning the room again. "He said he'd be dropping by today." Milo's heart skipped. He glanced at Rhea, whose expression flickered with something between confusion and dread. "Sir, are you referring to the gentleman who was here earlier?" she asked carefully. Grant turned to face her fully, his brow raised. "Yes, of course. Nico Cross. He was stopping by for a quiet walkthrough." The color drained from Ria's face. Her fingers twitched against her clipboard, and for once, words failed her. He didn't identify himself," she said quickly. "He looked casual, so I assumed—" Grant's face remained unreadable, but the silence around them grew heavier. "He came in?" Grant asked slowly, measuring her every word. "Yes," she admitted, her voice more hesitant. "But I didn't realize. He wasn't dressed like a billionaire," Grant offered dryly. She flinched slightly. "No, I just meant he wasn't the usual clientele. I didn't want him to feel uncomfortable browsing items outside his range." Milo stiffened. He had never heard Ria backpedal so fast. Grant sighed, adjusting his cuff. "You've been managing this store for how long?" 9 years, she replied instantly, eager to regain footing. "Then you should know better than anyone. That appearance doesn't equate to value," he said, not raising his voice, but letting the words land like bricks. "Nico prefers discretion. He's the kind of man who tests the business before investing in it." "Investing?" Milo asked, his voice low. Grant turned slightly toward him and nodded. "Yes, Nico's the new co-owner of Verite. Today was his first visit since the deal closed last week." Ria staggered back a step, visibly shaken. I didn't know." "Did you ask?" Grant replied simply. Silence followed. Milo stood frozen, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. The man Ria had dismissed, the man she subtly mocked in front of staff, was not only a serious buyer, he now owned part of the company. "He was polite," Milo said, breaking the quiet. "He asked thoughtful questions. He never raised his voice." Grant nodded approvingly. "That's Nico. He notices everything. He judges character, not credit cards." Ria turned away briefly, her voice faltering. "It was a misunderstanding." Grant didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the door, as if expecting Nico to reappear at any moment. The entire room felt suspended in a fragile kind of silence, like a bubble about to burst. Milo looked again at the empty space where the man had stood. Somehow, it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like the beginning of a reckoning. And Ria, normally the one in control, had no idea just how much control she was about to lose. The boutique doors swung open again, this time with a quiet authority that pulled all eyes toward the entrance. Nico stepped back inside, the same hoodie draped over his shoulders, his hands tucked casually in his pockets. His posture hadn't changed, nor had his expression. But something about him felt heavier now, like the room belonged to him and everyone inside had yet to notice. Grant turned immediately, relief flashing across his face. "There he is," he said, moving toward Nico. "You're right on time." Nico nodded once, his calm gaze drifting slowly across the boutique. His eyes passed over Ria, lingering only a second, but it was enough. She straightened as if bracing for a collision. Grant clapped him gently on the back. "I've let the team know. I assume you had a colorful experience?" Nico offered a faint smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Let's just say I learned more than I expected." Ria took a tentative step forward. "Mr. Cross," she began, her voice suddenly soft, almost sweet. "Please allow me to apologize for earlier. I had no idea." Nico looked at her, unblinking. That much was clear. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words followed. The edge in his voice was sharper than his appearance had ever suggested. It wasn't loud, but it cut deep. I was simply following procedure, she added quickly. We have certain protocols in place for high-value merchandise. Interesting, Nico replied. I was told Verite prides itself on service, not suspicion. Grant crossed his arms, watching the interaction without interruption. Milo stood behind a display shelf, not daring to move, but hanging on every word. Nico turned and walked over to the coat rack, running his hand once again across the plum cashmere. This piece caught my eye the moment I walked in. I asked about a fitting, about purchasing, even about paying in full. Each time I was shut down. Rhea forced a smile. It wasn't personal. Nico looked at her again. It never is, until it is. She paled slightly, the color draining from her face as the weight of the moment pressed down. Milo watched closely. There was no gloating in Nico's tone, no arrogance in his posture. Just clarity. He wasn't angry. He was deliberate. Each word he spoke was measured, delivered with the precision of someone used to being underestimated and knowing exactly how to respond. I didn't come here for attention, Nico continued. I came to see how this place treats people when no one's watching. Grant finally stepped in. That's why I didn't announce him. We needed to know what the real customer experience felt like. Milo shifted slightly, the tension in the boutique thickening with every second. I've spent years building businesses quietly, Nico said, voice level. I invest in places that reflect my values. Integrity, humility, respect. Those are non-negotiable. Rhea's hands fidgeted at her sides. I can assure you— Don't, Nico interrupted gently. You had every opportunity to show me who you are. And you did. The boutique fell silent again. Even the gentle hum of background music felt distant now. You judged me before I spoke. You dismissed me without cause. You invented rules to avoid serving me, Nico said, his gaze unwavering. Is that how Verite defines exclusivity? Rhea blinked rapidly. That's not fair. No, he replied. It's just honest. Grant turned to Rhea, disappointment etched across his features. You've managed this boutique for nearly a decade. How many others have you quietly turned away? She said nothing. Her silence spoke louder than any defense could. Nico shifted his attention to Milo. And you? Milo cleared his throat, unsure if he was being addressed or tested. I wasn't sure what to do, but I should have stepped up. Nico nodded. You observed. You listened. That's more than most. What matters is what you do next. Milo gave a small nod, still unsure how to process the moment. Nico faced Rhea one last time. This boutique represents a brand I now co-own. The way you treated me doesn't align with that brand's promise. You made it clear who you think deserves respect and who doesn't. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Please, I've given years of service to this company. My numbers, my reviews, won't save you, Nico said firmly. I don't reward appearances. I reward values. And today, yours were nowhere to be found. Grant placed a hand gently on Rhea's shoulder, a silent gesture that said more than words ever could. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't resist. She had already lost. Nico turned back toward the display window. Outside, the sun had started to dip, casting soft shadows across the sidewalk. Without saying another word, he walked toward the door. As he reached the threshold, he paused and glanced back. Exclusivity is earned, he said, not assumed. Then he stepped into the evening light, leaving the boutique changed in ways that would echo long after he was gone. The door closed softly behind Nico, but the echo of his words lingered in the boutique like perfume. Unseen, but impossible to ignore. No one spoke. Even the usual background chatter of fashion talk and subtle music seemed to vanish, replaced by an air of stunned realization. Ria stood motionless near the center display, her hands clasped tightly, her face frozen in disbelief. Her eyes darted around the room, as if searching for someone to back her up, to explain away what had just occurred. But no one came forward. Not Milo. Not Mr. Grant. Not the few quiet customers who had witnessed everything in tense silence. Grant slowly turned to her, his disappointment no longer hidden behind a professional mask. "I don't think I need to explain what happens next." Ria finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "I've never treated a client with disrespect intentionally. I was protecting the brand." "You weren't protecting anything," he said evenly. "You were protecting your assumptions," she swallowed hard. "I've built this store. Every successful season, every high-profile client. Those weren't accidents." "No one's questioning your performance," Grant replied. "But performance without character is hollow." Nico came to observe, not to test. "What you showed him was a version of verite we can't afford to maintain." Her chin lifted slightly, the defiance returning, but it lacked the strength it once carried. "So, that's it?" Grant nodded slowly. "It has to be. A brand is only as strong as its values. And today, yours didn't reflect ours." Across the floor, Milo quietly gathered a few misplaced items, trying to look busy while absorbing every second of what was unfolding. He had seen managers come and go, but none like this. Ria had always been untouchable, until now. She looked at Milo briefly, maybe searching for support, or even a last ounce of validation. He gave her none. Instead, his eyes lowered respectfully, signaling that her time had passed. Ria turned away, collected her tablet from the counter, and walked slowly toward the back office. Her heels clicked with less certainty now, the sound of finality in each step. No dramatic outburst, no parting shot, just quiet resignation. Once she disappeared from view, Grant exhaled, breaking the heavy silence. He approached Milo, his tone softer. "You handled yourself well." "I wasn't sure what to do," Milo admitted. He didn't seem like someone who wanted pity. He just wanted to be treated like anyone else. Grant nodded. "Exactly. That's all he ever asks for. And now, he's in a position to demand it. Not just for himself, but for everyone who walks through these doors." Milo looked around the boutique. Nothing had changed visually, but everything felt different. The atmosphere had shifted. There was a new weight to the place, less about luxury and more about what luxury should mean. "Will he be back?" Milo asked. "He will," Grant said with certainty, "but not to be catered to. He's not interested in flattery. He wants to know that people are seen, respected, no matter what they wear or how they walk in." Milo nodded thoughtfully. "It makes sense now." Grant gave him a brief pat on the shoulder before turning toward the exit. "Consider this day a reset. For the store. For the team. For you." After he left, the boutique slowly returned to motion. A couple resumed browsing, whispers filled the air again, and the usual rhythm resumed. But everything was subtly altered. Later that evening, as the lights dimmed and the final hangers were aligned, Milo stood by the same rack Nico had, admired. He reached out and touched the plum coat sleeve. wondering how many times someone had been overlooked simply for looking different. The boutique had lost a manager, but it had gained something far more important: awareness. Out on the street, the city carried on. Beverly Hills didn't pause for lessons in humility. But inside Verité, a quiet change had taken root. And as for Nico, he hadn't come to teach a lesson. He'd come to observe. But in his silence, he had said more than a lecture ever could. Respect isn't worn. It's given. And sometimes, the most powerful people are the ones who never ask to be noticed.